We all know about takings like eminent domain, where the government wants to put a highway through your living room. But sustainable development Nazis and their friendly word-processing lawyers have come up with some interesting new ways to take your private property. One way is to create conservation easements and historic trusts.
Conservation easement and historic trust are two ways of imposing limited controls on private property. Conservation easement, like any other easement, says that there are certain kinds of uses that can or cannot be applied by the property owner in order to do what? In order to advance somebody's theory of conservation.
Most people, when they hear the term conservation easement, it sounds like a good thing. Well, we'll offset. We won't use this piece of property for, the Rocky Mountain elk or whatever, or some salamander. So you're blocked off. If you join this easement, you're given money, an exchange of money, to say, I will not use this land for 90 years. But then when you die, the easement goes on, and people beyond you cannot use that property to how they feel and want to use that property.
And the experience that most people who have had in regards to this endeavor is that after 10 years, the terms of that conservation easement make the land worthless, or actually a cost to them. And so it's a process of beating the landowners down until lands are simply surrendered. Once you've given into a conservation easement, you're finished.
These entities are proliferating across the land as hundreds of thousands of helpless citizens who have been raped and pillaged now realize.
Conservation easements are used to promise farmers that if they sign a conservation easement, their land will be a farm forever. And I've never met a farmer yet who wanted to leave the farm. They want to leave it to their kids. They want to move on forward with it. And so they look at this and they're under all kinds of pressure about what to do with their farms. So now they've come up with this plan to ease the pain of the farmers by signing a conservation easement. But they do it's signed in perpetuity, forever. And what the farmers begin to find out is, after a few years, all of a sudden they have nothing left to leave to their kids. They now have all kinds of regulations from the land trust they signed with about how they can grow crops, sustainable crop growth and that sort of thing. They can't survive because it doesn't work, and there's no way out of it.
The idea is this: any area, landmass, or territory a UN government or NGO wants to rezone as a California-type wildland or an historic mill in a place like Chester Springs, Pennsylvania, simply gets a circle drawn around it on the map. Then, Agenda 21 Nazis from some historic trust in Washington, D.C., or some ICLEI-sponsored COG offers farmers and owners of historic property bribe money if they will just put their property into an irrevocable trust and sign away the development rights for a good cause.
That particular piece of property, usually that comes up with buildings, structures of one kind or another. And so you're limited in making any kinds of changes there. So that freezes that particular property in a historic epoch.
Conservatives believe, in their country. We love our history, we love our heritage, and anytime we have a chance to preserve it, then that's what we want to do. Well, they've come up with this sucker move called National Heritage Areas. National Heritage Areas are promoted to protect something historic that happened there. The fact of the matter is, I haven't been in one yet that wasn't preserved already through, a presidential residence, something like that. And it's the same environmental groups and same NGO organizations that are behind this.
The farmer or property owner, needing money, because the water and roads sustaining his land have been shut down by the Wildlands Project, agrees to an easement filed against his property.
Property is taken for an easement. They only take a small strip of the property to be used, perhaps to put in a gas pipeline or something, a public utility. But it all comes down to a beneficial use of the property by the property owner is removed from his control.
Little by little, through a complicated dance of legal shenanigans and outright deceit, The trust eventually gains control over the farm, the rural land, or some historic Chester Springs property. The original farmer or victimized historic property owner is then kicked off his land or out of his house when some infraction of the trust covenant, such as improper windows, is discovered.
This particular piece of property, for one reason or another, or a structure built on the property, has some kind of historic value, and you cannot change in any way that particular piece of property. Usually that comes up with buildings, structures of one kind or another. And so you're limited in making any kinds of changes there.
The animals and the Agenda 21 Nazis are now free to roam into yet more wildlands and historic properties.
I spent my entire career as a government appraiser, an appraiser of industrial, commercial, and residential property. And what I found in the year 2002 was that there was a revolution, a planning revolution going on. And it literally made it impossible to tell what property was worth or what you could do with it. Because even though it might be zoned for a use, you were not able to actually use it for that purpose.
There's no rhyme or reason. The whole law in this area is what I call reflexive law. That is, the law just reflects what they want to do. And so endangered species is now interpreted, along with a precautionary principle, to allow local governments to do or say anything about a land use.
So you might be zoned one way, but if your general plan says that you have to develop smart growth, well, you can't use it in the way that you thought you could, and you may end up having to sell your property to a developer, a favored developer, who's getting grants.
Permit discretion is another tool used by local governments. If they like you, you might get a permit. If they don't like you won't get a permit. And that kind of abuse isn't as recognized as it ought to be. It clearly exists. Those who've been victims of it know it exists. And those people need to speak out more because, without work by the early victims of Agenda 21, we all will ultimately become victims of Agenda 21.
But if conservation easements and historic trusts don't work, sustainable developers have devised other schemes to take property.
If you're out in the rural and suburban areas, you might be thinking, well, nobody's going to get me off my property. I'm here and I like it and I'm just going to keep living here. And sure, that seems great. But just think about this. Your roads won't be paved because your county has no more money. And so they're going to pulverize your roads and turn them to gravel. Or you're going to have your well monitored and you're being restricted on the use. You might actually not be able to afford your insurance anymore, or you might have your insurance canceled because you're in an area that's a fire area. You might find that you're not able to continue to pay the taxes for the sheriff and for the hospital and for all the other services that you have out there in the county because other people have been removed from their land through restrictions on their use or through fire or other situations that have occurred and make it so that very few people are out there and they're carrying the entire tax burden. So then you're finding that you're not able to actually maintain the land that you're on, and you'll find that you're moved off of your land and moved into the city.
How does it help the Wildlands Project? It sets up more of those priority development areas that are then going to be connected by a corridor. And then you have this whole network across the United States that is now going back to that Wildlands Project map.
In 2006, 5 black robes decided that if a community can better use the land, then it's okay to take it, use eminent domain and take it. As soon as that decision was made, across the country, thousands of decisions using eminent domain were made. Why? Why would they ignore every precedent that was ever done in every court case in the Supreme Court about private property and every line ever written by our founding fathers about private property? Why would they eliminate that? The truth of the matter is they had to do it in order to implement sustainable development. And in that day, private property in America died.